Lean on the king's guard, you get elbowed. He noticed something that stayed in his mind for years. People treated some men differently. When a man wore a uniform, when he walked beside important figures, when others believed he had strong support, doors opened easily for him. Voices became polite. Arguments disappeared. Respect came without effort. As a boy, he did not fully understand why this happened, but he felt it deeply. At school, he saw how students who were close to teachers were treated gently, even when they made mistakes. In the neighborhood, he noticed how people who had connections never waited in lines and never feared consequences. Slowly, a belief formed in his heart. Strength does not always come from who you are, but from who you stand beside. His family lived a simple life. His father worked long hours and returned home tired. His mother managed the house with patience and care. They taught him honesty, hard work, and self-respect. But the world outside their home taught him something different. It showed him shortcuts, shadows of power, and borrowed strength. He listened more to the world than to his parents, not because he didn't love them, but because the world looked louder and more rewarding. As he grew older, this belief became stronger. He started thinking that life was unfair to people who stood alone. He believed that standing by powerful people was smarter than struggling on your own. In his mind, the king's guard represented protection, influence, and safety. If you stood close to them, nothing could touch you. This idea became his silent guide. In his teenage years, he began to choose his company carefully, not based on character or kindness, but on influence. He stayed close to people who seemed confident, loud, and connected. When they spoke, others listened. When they walked, others made space. He felt important just by standing beside them. It gave him a sense of belonging, a sense of power that he had never earned but enjoyed deeply. Inside, however, there was also fear, fear of being ignored, fear of being weak, fear of standing alone. He never admitted this fear to anyone, but it controlled many of his choices. Whenever life became uncertain, he leaned closer to those he believed could protect him. He thought this was wisdom. He thought this was how the world worked. Small moments began to shape his future. Once, when he was wrong in an argument, someone defended him not because he was right, but because of who he stood with. Another time, he avoided consequences simply because his name was associated with certain people. Each time this happened, his belief became stronger. He started thinking, why struggle alone when power can carry you? But not everyone agreed with him. A close friend once told him that borrowed power disappears quickly. He smiled and ignored the warning. An elder advised him to build his own strength instead of leaning on others. He listened politely, but did not take it seriously. Advice sounded slow and old-fashioned. Standing near power felt fast and modern. Deep down, there was a quiet voice inside him that questioned his path. Late at night, when he was alone, he sometimes wondered what would happen if the people he depended on disappeared. But he pushed these thoughts away. Doubt felt uncomfortable. Confidence, even false confidence, felt better. He also misunderstood loyalty. He believed that staying close to powerful people automatically meant protection. He did not understand that power often protects itself first. He thought presence was enough. He did not realize that guards do not look after those who lean on them. They push away those who become a burden. As opportunities came, he chose the easier road. Instead of learning skills deeply, he relied on recommendations. Instead of patience, he used influence. Instead of growth, he chose appearance. From the outside, his life looked smooth. People thought he was smart and well-connected. Some even admired him. This praise fed his belief and blinded him further. Yet, life has a way of testing beliefs. Small cracks began to appear, though he ignored them. He noticed how quickly attitudes changed when influential people were not around. He noticed silence where there used to be smiles. Still, he convinced himself that this was temporary, that his position was secure. He believed leaning on the king's guard was the safest place in the world. He believed it would shield him from hardship, failure, and loss. He did not understand that guards are trained to move forward, not to carry weight leaning sideways. This part of his life was full of confidence, but it was borrowed confidence. It was full of security, but it was imagined security. He felt tall, but he was standing on someone else's shoulders. He did not yet know that when those shoulders move, the fall is sudden and painful. At this stage, his story was not about failure yet. It was about belief, a belief that seemed logical, common, and practical, a belief many people quietly hold. He truly thought he had understood life. He truly believed he had found the safest way forward. But life was preparing its lesson, a lesson not taught with words but with action. The elbow had not come yet, but it was already on its way. And when it arrived, it would change everything. As time moved forward, his belief did not weaken. Instead, it grew deeper and more dangerous. He became more confident in depending on people who looked strong and influential. He believed that being close to them would always keep him safe. He stopped thinking about long-term effort and focused only on staying within circles that seemed powerful. In his mind, survival was not about skill or patience, but about position. He started shaping his life around this idea. Every decision was influenced by one question: who is standing behind me? If the answer felt strong, he felt fearless. If not, he felt uneasy. He began avoiding situations where he had to stand alone. Responsibility made him uncomfortable, because responsibility meant relying on himself. He preferred shared spaces where someone else's presence could silently protect him. His friendships also changed. He slowly drifted away from honest people who spoke truth without fear. These people reminded him of effort, struggle, and patience, things he no longer wanted to hear. He felt more comfortable with those who talked about shortcuts, influence, and quick success. Conversations became shallow but exciting. Promises sounded big, even when they were empty. His family noticed the change. They saw that he was becoming restless and impatient. He listened less and argued more. When they spoke about values and long-term growth, he smiled but did not absorb their words. He believed they did not understand how the world truly worked. In his eyes, they were living in the past, while he was moving with the times. He began to enjoy the comfort that came with borrowed authority. People treated him differently when he arrived with the right company. Simple things became easier. He skipped lines, avoided questioning, and gained favors without asking. These moments felt like proof that he had chosen the right path. Each benefit strengthened his dependence and weakened his independence. But along with comfort came quiet changes inside him. He became less patient with problems. When something went wrong, he looked for someone else to fix it. When a mistake happened, he expected protection instead of learning. Slowly, his ability to handle pressure alone started fading. He did not notice this loss because life still felt smooth on the surface. There were moments when reality tried to warn him. Once, a person he trusted deeply ignored him during a difficult moment. Another time, he was asked to step aside when he was no longer useful in a situation. These moments felt uncomfortable, but he quickly explained them away. He told himself that misunderstandings happen and that his position was still safe. He also misunderstood respect. He thought people respected him for who he was. In truth, they respected the space he occupied. When that space shifted, so did their behavior. But he was too busy enjoying attention to see this clearly. Praise can be blinding, especially when it comes without effort. He stopped investing in himself. Learning new skills felt slow. Building patience felt tiring. Improving character felt unnecessary. Why work hard when influence could open doors faster? This mindset saved time in the present but quietly stole strength from the future. One of his old friends tried to reach him again. This friend spoke honestly and without fear. He warned him that leaning too much on others weakens the legs. He said that real support stands beside you, not in front of you. The man listened but felt irritated. Truth felt like an attack because it challenged his comfort. Inside, there was still a small voice of doubt. It whispered when he was alone. It asked what would happen if the guard moved forward without him. What if protection disappeared suddenly? He silenced that voice by surrounding himself with noise, people, and distractions. Silence scared him because silence revealed weakness. As months passed, his dependence deepened. He adjusted his behavior to please those he relied on. He laughed when they laughed. He agreed even when he didn't understand. Slowly, he lost parts of his identity. He became a reflection of the group rather than an individual. This made him feel safe, but also empty. He believed loyalty was about staying close. He did not understand that true loyalty requires value. Guards do not protect weight that slows them down. They protect direction, purpose, and strength. He was leaning, not walking. Signs of distance began appearing. Calls were returned late. Invitations became fewer. Conversations felt shorter. He sensed the shift but did not confront it. Confrontation required courage, and courage required standing alone. He chose comfort over clarity. At this stage, his life still looked stable from the outside. He still moved with confidence. He still felt untouchable, but inside something had changed. He was no longer growing. He was waiting, waiting for protection, waiting for approval, waiting for direction. He had built his house against another man's wall. It stood firm as long as the wall stood still. He did not realize that walls move, guards march forward, and power never pauses for those leaning on it. This part of his journey was about dependence, about choosing ease over strength, about mistaking proximity for protection. He believed he was secure, but he was slowly becoming invisible. The elbow had not struck yet, but the space was forming. And when the guard needed to move, he would not be warned. The moment did not arrive with noise or drama. It came quietly, like many turning points in real life. He did not wake up that day expecting anything to change. He followed his usual routine, carried the same confidence, and trusted the same sense of protection he had relied on for years. In his mind, nothing could go wrong because he believed he was standing in the safest place possible. But that day, the atmosphere felt different. Conversations around him were shorter. Eyes avoided his face. Smiles felt forced. He noticed it, but he told himself it was nothing. He had learned to ignore discomfort because comfort had trained him well. He walked forward with confidence, assuming the familiar support would be there as always. Then trouble appeared, small at first, but real. A situation arose where decisions had to be made quickly. Responsibility was needed. Someone had to speak clearly and take a stand. In moments like these, he usually stayed calm, knowing someone else would step in for him. He waited for that moment. He waited for protection. But this time, no one stepped forward. He looked around, expecting a familiar voice or gesture. Instead, he saw people moving away, creating space. The same people who once stood close now seemed busy with their own concerns. No one looked back at him. No one met his eyes. It felt like standing in a crowd and suddenly realizing you were alone. Confusion replaced confidence. His heart began to beat faster. He tried to speak, but his words felt weak. He was not used to carrying weight alone. He had leaned for too long. When he finally tried to take responsibility, his voice did not carry strength. It carried uncertainty. Then came the moment that stayed with him for a long time. Someone he trusted deeply, someone he believed would always stand beside him, pushed him aside without hesitation. It was not done with anger or cruelty. It was done with necessity. The guard had to move forward and he was in the way. That was the elbow. It was not about physical pain. It was about realization. He understood in that instant that he was not being protected. He was being tolerated, and now he was no longer useful. The space around him felt empty. The noise of the world faded. He felt small, exposed, and embarrassed. People watched, but no one helped. The protection he believed in vanished in seconds. Years of dependence collapsed into a single moment. Shame followed quickly. He wanted to explain himself, to remind them of past loyalty, of time spent together. But loyalty meant nothing without value. He had mistaken closeness for importance. He had mistaken presence for strength. He walked away quietly. There was no argument, no scene. He simply stepped aside just as he had been pushed. Each step felt heavier than the last. His confidence drained away, replaced by questions he had avoided for years. Why was he so easily removed? Why did no one defend him? Why did everything disappear so fast? The answers were painful but clear. He had built nothing of his own. He had borrowed confidence, borrowed respect, borrowed protection. And borrowed things can be taken back at any moment. That evening he sat alone for a long time. Silence surrounded him. There were no messages, no calls, no reassurance. The same people who once made him feel important were suddenly distant. It felt unreal, like waking up from a long dream and realizing your safety was imaginary. His mind replayed past moments. Every warning he ignored, every piece of advice he dismissed, every time someone told him to stand on his own feet, he finally understood what they meant. The understanding hurt, but it was honest. For the first time in years, he faced himself without support. The reflection was uncomfortable. He saw fear where confidence used to be. He saw weakness where he thought strength lived. He felt anger at himself, not at others. The elbow had not betrayed him. It had revealed him. In the days that followed, life became harder. People treated him differently. Without borrowed power, he was just another man. He waited in lines. He explained himself. He faced consequences. Every small struggle felt bigger because he was no longer shielded. But with hardship came clarity. He realized how dependent he had become. Simple problems that others handled easily felt heavy to him. He understood how much he had avoided growth. The realization was painful, but it was real. There were moments when bitterness tried to take over. He thought about blaming others. He thought about calling the elbow unfair. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had leaned where he should have stood. He had trusted shadows instead of building substance. Late at night, he questioned his identity. Who was he without influence? Who was he without protection? These questions scared him, but they also challenged him. For the first time, he saw a path that required effort, not association. The elbow marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. A life of comfort ended. A life of responsibility began. He had lost something that day, but he had also gained awareness. Awareness is not gentle. It does not comfort. It does not protect, but it prepares. He understood now that guards move forward. They do not carry those who lean. And when they move, they do not look back. This part of his journey was the fall. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. It stripped him of illusion and left him with truth. And though the truth hurt, it was the first solid ground he had felt in years. The elbow did not destroy him. It woke him up. Life after that moment felt unfamiliar and heavy. The comfort he once lived in was gone, and in its place was silence and responsibility. There was no one to stand in front of him anymore. No one to speak on his behalf. Every step he took now depended on his own effort. At first, this felt frightening. He had forgotten what it was like to rely on himself. The days became slower. Tasks that once felt easy now required patience. He had to wait, explain, and sometimes accept refusal. These experiences bruised his pride, but they also opened his eyes. For the first time, he saw how life worked without borrowed strength. It was not cruel, but it was honest. He struggled in the beginning. His confidence was shaken, and doubt followed him everywhere. When problems appeared, his first instinct was to look around for support. Each time he realized there was no one to lean on, a wave of fear passed through him. But slowly, something else appeared too: determination. He began with small steps. He stopped expecting favors and started offering effort. Instead of searching for influence, he focused on learning. Skills he once ignored now felt important. He spent time improving himself, even when progress was slow. Each small achievement gave him a feeling he had never known before, a sense of earned confidence. The journey was not smooth. There were days when he felt tired and frustrated. On some days, he thought about returning to old habits. The memory of easy comfort tempted him, but each time he remembered how quickly that comfort disappeared. That memory kept him grounded. He learned to listen more, to observe more, to speak less but with purpose. Life taught him through experience what advice could not. He understood that respect gained through effort feels different from respect given out of fear or position. One lasts longer. The other fades quickly. He also learned humility. Being pushed aside had hurt his pride deeply. But rebuilding required him to accept that he did not know everything. He asked questions. He accepted correction. This was difficult at first, but it slowly made him stronger. People began to notice the change, not in loud ways but in quiet ones. They saw his consistency. They saw his patience. They saw that he no longer demanded space but earned it. Trust returned slowly, built on action rather than association. He repaired old relationships. He apologized where silence had caused distance. Some people forgave him. Some did not. He accepted both outcomes. He understood that rebuilding trust takes time and not all bridges can be restored. Loneliness visited him often during this phase. Growth is usually quiet and quiet can feel empty. But in that loneliness he discovered self-respect. He learned that standing alone does not mean being weak. Sometimes it means being honest. His inner voice changed. It no longer chased comfort. It encouraged effort. When challenges came, fear still appeared, but it no longer controlled him. He faced problems directly, even when his hands trembled. Courage, he realized, is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite fear. The more he worked on himself, the less he cared about borrowed importance. Titles, connections, and influence lost their shine. What mattered now was reliability. Being someone others could depend on, not someone who depended on others. Mistakes still happened. Failure still visited. But this time, failure taught instead of humiliating. Each mistake added to his understanding. Each struggle shaped his character. He noticed something unexpected. Life felt heavier but also lighter. He carried responsibility, but he was free from illusion. There was peace in knowing where he stood. No sudden elbows, no sudden falls, just steady ground. He understood now that true strength is built quietly. No audience, no shortcuts, just effort repeated over time. This realization did not make him proud. It made him calm. By the end of this phase, he was no longer the man who leaned. He was not perfect, but he was present. He was learning to walk on his own. The guard had moved on, but he no longer watched it. His focus was forward on his own path. This part of his journey was about rebuilding. Not quickly, not easily, but honestly. And for the first time in his life, he felt real. Time passed, not quickly, but steadily. The man who once searched for protection in shadows now walked with quiet confidence. His life no longer depended on who stood beside him, but on how he stood himself. He did not become famous or powerful in the way he once imagined, but he became something far more important, stable. His days were simple but meaningful. He woke up with purpose, worked with honesty, and rested with a clear mind. There was no rush to impress anyone. No need to prove his importance. The pressure he once carried to stay close to influence was gone. In its place was calm. He noticed how differently he now experienced the world. People listened to him, not because of who he knew, but because of what he said. When he gave his word, he kept it. When he made a promise, he fulfilled it. Slowly, others began to trust him. This trust felt solid, not fragile like before. Opportunities came again, but this time they came slowly and naturally. They were not handed to him. He earned them through consistency. When challenges appeared, he faced them directly. He no longer waited for rescue. He solved problems step by step, even when it took time. He met people who once walked similar paths to his old life. He saw himself in their behavior, the need to stand near power, the fear of standing alone. Instead of judging them, he felt understanding. He knew that lesson cannot be forced. It must be lived. When asked for advice, he spoke carefully. He did not preach. He shared his experience honestly. He told them that borrowed strength feels easy, but it disappears without warning. He explained that real growth is slow, quiet, and sometimes lonely, but it lasts. One day, he stood in a place where he once felt invisible. This time he felt present, not important in a loud way but respected in a quiet one. He realized how far he had come. The memory of the elbow returned, but it no longer hurt. It felt like a reminder, not a wound. He understood now that the elbow saved him. It pushed him out of illusion and into reality. Without it, he might have lived his entire life leaning, never walking on his own. He no longer feared being alone. He valued solitude because it helped him think clearly. He used silence to reflect, not to escape. His identity was no longer tied to others. It belonged to him. His relationship with his family improved. They saw the change in him. They saw patience where there was once impatience. They saw humility where there was once pride. Trust returned naturally. Success, when it came, felt different. It did not excite him loudly. It satisfied him quietly. He knew it was built on effort, not chance. That knowledge gave him peace. He learned to measure life differently, not by attention but by stability, not by influence but by impact, not by how many doors opened quickly but by how many stayed open over time. There were still hard days. Life never becomes easy forever, but he handled difficulty with balance. He understood that struggle is not failure. It is part of growth. He also learned forgiveness. He forgave those who stepped away when he fell. He forgave himself for leaning too long. Holding anger felt heavy, and he had learned enough about weight. Sometimes he watched people rushing to stand near power, leaning for comfort. He smiled gently, knowing that each person must learn in their own time. He did not wish pain on anyone, but he knew that awareness often comes through experience. The story of his life did not end with applause. It ended with understanding, and understanding was enough. In the end, he stood firm, not guarded, not protected, but grounded. He no longer leaned on the king's guard, and because of that, he was never elbowed again.